This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The death of a 41-year-old woman who was severely burned has now been ruled a homicide. Melissa Cook is from Sepultuak Cree Nation. She died in August, but police are asking for the public's help now. CBC's Joanne Roberts explains, and we do have to warn you, this story contains distressing details.
This is the face police want you to see as they investigate the death of 41-year-old Melissa Cook. She died in August from severe burns to her legs, the victim of a homicide.
You can see the person behind this picture. We've talked to her family. Her family is grieving as a result of her death, her homicide. Her family wants to know more. They want to have justice and they want answers.
Police don't know exactly where or when Cook was burned. They believe it was June or early July. They think she lived in homeless encampments and went to Siloam Mission. In early July, she told shelter staff about her injuries, and she was taken to a hospital and was there until she died. Nelson Janai is the chief of Sepultuak Cree Nation. He says when these deaths happen, the impacts are deeply felt throughout the community.
It's a broken chain that needs fixing. The only way it needs fixing is by basically talking about it and addressing it and solving it. That's what we need today.
Police say the plea to the public was delayed in part because of this photo. Murray says police wanted another photo, but they talked to family, and family said this was more accurate.
There was a lot of work behind the scenes that went into this release just to make sure we do it in a cultural and trauma-informed perspective.
The plea becomes the day before October 4th, National Day of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Jason Whitford is the CEO of End Homelessness Winnipeg. He says there are many people like Cook who come to cities from smaller areas.
We need to do a better job helping First Nations and Indigenous people that come to the city and need access to resources and supports.
Winnipeg police say they'll be looking for more information at the end of the week. Cook's photo will be turned into a poster and will go to shelters and encampments. They want to hear from people in the areas Cook visited before she went to the hospital. Joanne Roberts, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Being in prison can take a serious toll on a person's mental health. We know this about inmates. It's well documented. But as the CBC's Ian Fraze explains, it's also true for the corrections officers.
Corrections officers who've walked these halls say few people understand what they see and hear on the job.
Okay, what am I going to get today? Who's going to, yell, scream, swear, threaten me today? Me or my coworkers. It's really inevitable.
That former corrections officer who worked for more than a decade spoke to us anonymously, and we've altered his voice. His experience offers insight into how pervasive mental health challenges are for those working in prisons and jails. Last year, 20% of all psychological injury claims made to the Workers' Compensation Board in Manitoba were filed by corrections officers. Such claims could range from post-traumatic stress disorder, mental disorders, a depressive state, anxiety, stress, and burnout.
And things are getting better, but there is a lot of stigma about coming forward with feeling that way.
He says he couldn't guard his mind from the assaults, verbal abuse, and self-harm he saw.
The one I'll never forget is when a girl was upset with me and she told me she was going to slit my throat and kill my family.
He says work stress resulted in severe chest pains and a stomach ulcer. He barely slept, and eventually he quit. His story doesn't surprise the union representing corrections officers.
We've been hearing from our corrections officers that the job is hard and it's difficult, and the issues and the incidents that happen in the job, they compound. So they build up over time.
It's one reason MGEU ran an ad campaign last month about corrections officers, sharing stories.
I think I was a year in and I had a shank pulled on me.
And encouraging more mental health supports from the government. The province says it recently created a unit to address staff wellness. A public safety expert says correctional facilities need to be better venues for rehabilitation.
The well-being of staff and the well-being of prisoners are both, tied to the environment. So unless we pay more attention and make sure that individuals are having their needs met in ways that are healthy and humane, everyone will suffer.
The officer who spoke to us says he supports any efforts to get his former colleagues the help they need. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 20-year-old woman has been missing for almost 6 weeks now. Winnipeg police are concerned for her well-being. Michelle Grizel was last seen August 25th in the city's William White neighborhood. She's described as being about 5'4", 125 pounds, thin build, long brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with any information on her whereabouts is asked to call the Winnipeg Police Service's Missing Persons Unit. The day after, a Manitoba court found former Winnipeg Chief Administrative Officer Phil Schiegel took a bribe, the Crown's office wrote a briefing note to the government. That note explained why charges weren't laid nearly 3 years ago, when the RCMP investigation into the Winnipeg Police Headquarters construction project concluded. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut reports.
Briefing notes are routinely prepared for politicians to keep them apprised of important issues and prepare them for questions from the opposition and the media. In these documents obtained by CBC News through access to information legislation, prosecution services doubled down on why no charges were laid in the Winnipeg Police Headquarters scandal. For 2.5 years, RCMP investigated allegations of fraud and forgery in the Police HQ construction project. Then the file sat with the Crown for another 2.5 years, and Manitoba Justice announced no charges would be laid in December 2019. The March briefing note reiterates the fact that the Crown felt there was no reasonable likelihood of conviction in the case, and that's why no charges. It also reminds the province that the standard in civil law is far lower than criminal. Mayor Brian Bowman and City Council members have been calling for a public inquiry into the Police HQ project since 2017, despite facing outside pressure to bury it.
I can say that there is there's certainly pressure that is being placed on politicians to simply make this go away. And so, like when I say I've been undeterred, I really mean it.
He wouldn't say who is applying pressure, but hopes the next mayor will continue to call on the province to hold a public inquiry into this file and push ahead with the civil lawsuit that found Phil Schiegel, Winnipeg's former chief administrative officer, took a bribe, a decision he's appealing. The rest of the defendants are supposed to go to trial in 2024. This political expert says an inquiry would help get to the bottom of what really happened.
It's just not full accountability. You have to try to determine how many people knew, how many people were directly involved, what actions and inactions were taken, and we don't know the full story yet.
Bowman says, unfortunately, the province won't budge on the issue of an inquiry.
We have certainly felt for many years that the province doesn't have Winnipeg taxpayers' backs on this file.
He said if there are additional people who should be held accountable for their actions, a public inquiry is the only way to uncover that. We asked all 11 mayoral candidates where they stand on the issue. All of them said they would continue with the Police HQ lawsuit. 10 of them said they would also continue to press the province for a public inquiry. Only Jenny Mottkulek said she would not call for an inquiry. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
We've all noticed the rising cost of food lately. For people in remote northern communities, many food items have always been much more expensive than they are in the south. CBC's Austin Grabish flew to Puckatawagan to show us why the opening of a new store had people there celebrating.
A song of celebration, photos to remember the day, and the ribbons cut to welcome a new community-owned store.
The people have waited for a very long time to have a store, to call it their own.
Well, it's great, nice. First time I've seen a new store.
Perhaps the most significant part of this store's opening are the prices. People in the community tell us they're about half of what they pay for the same products down the street at the current northern store.
Last week we picked up 4 bags of groceries. It was a little bit over $400. We pick up a cart full today and it's just a little over $200. So huge difference. And we're still making money at these prices.
This new $5.4 million grocery store on the remote Matthias Colomb Cree Nation in Puckatawagan is a game changer. It has fresh, healthy food, an in-store bakery, and was made possible through a loan taken out by the on-reserve community of about 2,500.
We're hoping to have a profit, but mostly it's for the community members that they don't need to go and shop out of town because that's what we do.
Chief Lorna Biggity says the store gives her remote Indigenous community independence. Up until the grocer's opening, the Northern store had a monopoly on food. At the Northern, a frozen pizza is $16.49, a loaf of bread $6.59, and a tub of margarine over $14. To get cheaper groceries, residents pay to ship in food on a train from The Pas 8 hours south.
This is a deal, $16.99. If you shop in The Pas, it's like $25, $30.
Puckatawagan is also celebrating the opening of a new band office and tiny homes for residents to live in. It's all part of the community taking charge of its future, and Chief Biggity says there's more to come.
There is going to be a hotel, the restaurant, and some other ways of pulling in the money to stay in here in our community instead of leaving.
The store is expected to create 12 jobs. The hope is that it becomes a model for other remote Indigenous communities. Austin Grabish, CBC News, Puckatawagan.
The quest by a southwestern Manitoba First Nation to search for unmarked residential school graves has been put on hold. Sioux Valley Dakota Nation was planning to start a radar survey of the ground today. But as CBC's Riley Lachuk reports, they learned late last week that the property owner has denied them access.
This is just the latest delay Sioux Valley Dakota Nation has faced in its search for unmarked graves. Sioux Valley started its Missing Children project 10 years ago now. It was established to help identify unmarked graves at the site of the former Brandon Residential School.
We're talking about a sensitive matter here. We're talking about the burial sites of children and, recognizing that we want to rectify, those, I guess, the problems or the history of the residential school and the trauma that it's caused for Indigenous people.
The former Brandon Residential School opened in 1895 and ran until 1972. Sioux Valley owns the land where that school once stood. It has so far identified 104 potential graves in 3 cemeteries, but only 78 are accounted for through historical records. The site of the potential gravesite they're hoping to search is now where a campground operates. A peaceful protest was held at the entrance to that campground on Friday, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Chief Jennifer Bowen says it's been hard to get in.
It's not only important to have access, but it's also important that we have full cooperation with the landowner to ensure that we have the time and space to have the work completed that needs to be done. I know it's a timely process.
The campground's owners say part of the campsite has already been decommissioned for the project, and while they're sympathetic to Sioux Valley and what it's trying to do, they say they're also trying to make a living. They hope to meet with Sioux Valley officials and come up with a solution. Bowen says she and Sioux Valley are trying to be cautious and respectful as this search moves forward. She says it is difficult, not only emotionally, but also because there are so many different agencies involved in this. She hopes to get everyone together in one room soon. Riley Lachuk, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now, stories like these can be upsetting to many people. Emotional support is available for anyone affected by residential schools. To access help, call the 24-hour support line on your screen, 1-866-925-4419. Winnipeg police have stopped an attempt to enlarge an encampment outside the Manitoba Legislature. Protesters tried to bring in poles to build a third teepee near 2 that already stand on the front lawn. Dozens of police officers stood in a row near the legislature entrance and turned back someone who tried to carry in 1 pole. Another pole brought in earlier was removed by a protester after speaking with police officers. Justice Minister Kelvin Gertson said in a statement there have been safety concerns associated with protesters on the legislative grounds, including sightings of weapons. Gertson's press secretary could not elaborate on that, so we've asked police for more information. The Stephenson government passed a law in the spring banning encampments on the legislature grounds. A civil court has ruled that the death of an 87-year-old woman in her own Winnipeg home in 2004 was not accidental. Instead, a family member has been found responsible for the death. Jessie Garwood's body was found in the basement of her house. She'd suffered extensive injuries, including blunt force head trauma. She had broken ribs and wounds to the backs of her hands. Police investigated but never laid charges. Her son, Jim Garwood, then filed a civil lawsuit claiming his former stepdaughter was responsible for the death. Today, a judge ruled in his favor. Garwood now wants police to reopen the investigation into his mother's death. The provincial government unveiled a new plan today to reduce the number of Indigenous youth in custody. The program was developed by Marymount, a social services organization. 45 youth with intensive needs have been identified in Winnipeg and Thompson. The organization's executive director, Nancy Parker, says family, friends, and experts will be involved in their support. The program will also include both Indigenous and Western influences.
Through weaving together all these different potential opportunities and ideas that the youth, the family, and their team are going to bring to the table, it could absolutely be basketball one day, ceremony the next, canoeing the next, maybe a leadership program, maybe it's a particular project at school.
The program is funded by a social impact bond. If the program reaches its targets to reduce time in custody for the Indigenous youth, the province will pay back investors $2.25 million. A crowd that included anti-vaccine mandate activists joined Jenny Motkaluk at the Forks today. The event was held to reiterate her opposition to changes to Canada Day celebrations. CBC's Cameron McLean has more.
When I said that it was wrong to cancel Canada Day, they decided that I had to be shut up and shut down.
At the Forks today, Jenny Motkaluk repeated her call for the city to fire its appointees to the Forks board.
They caved in to the woke mob and they will be fired. I will replace them with people who share our values, who share our pride in this country, and who insist that Canada Day be celebrated right here at the Forks every July the 1st.
Some people in the crowd carried signs with anti-vaccine mandate slogans. When reporters asked about this,
I wouldn't know anything about that. I know that there are people here who believe in Canada and who are horrified that the Forks chose to cancel it and who share my values.
The Forks made changes to its Canada Day event after the discovery of potential unmarked graves at residential schools. At the rally today, Forks officials said Motkaluk wasn't allowed to be on the property. Before the event began, security approached Motkaluk's campaign team to tell them to leave. A Forks spokesperson released a statement, writing, "This group did not have a space booking with us, so security approached to question the group. In order to be transparent and equitable to all, we do not take bookings for any campaign announcements from any candidates."
First and foremost is to identify those areas.
Motkaluk wasn't the only candidate making announcements today. Idris Adelakun wants the city to build affordable housing on vacant land to help reduce homelessness.
So we have already come up with a model right now, and it's very cheap. It's not that expensive. So, but there is a need for us to work with the city, the council, to, amend our bylaws so that we can start building those affordable housing units.
Adelakun also wants the city to speed up the development permit process. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Election Day is a few weeks away still, but you can vote early starting today. Advance polling opened at the City Hall and also the Canada Life Centre, with up to 140 more locations opening over the next few weeks. Starting this weekend, advance polls open at Grant Park, at Kildonan Place, and at Polo Park Shopping Centre. Manitoba's municipal election is October 26th. And CBC Manitoba will host a live Winnipeg mayoral debate October 29th. That's 1 week before the civic election. An opportunity for voters like you to learn more about those who might become Winnipeg's next mayor. Find out where they stand on the matters that are most important to you. The live debate will air from approximately 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. right here on CBC TV. It'll also be on CBC Radio, online at CBC Manitoba's website, on CBC Gem, and on our Facebook page. Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa will moderate the event. Meteorologist John Sauder joins us now, and he is a very popular guy right now because, boy, what a mild start we've had to October.
Yeah, both Saturday and Sunday and today in the 20s. We just reached 20 degrees at the airport. Tomorrow, similar, but you know it can't last at this time of year, and I'll show you when that sudden and abrupt change will arrive. The other thing about today is the winds were very light. Right now, southeast at 7, didn't see anything higher than about 10 kilometers per hour through the day. Dew point at 13. So a bit of moisture out there, but really it is just a very pleasant day at 20 degrees, and we just popped up to 20, so reached our daytime high for today. Few showers around. Somebody in the south end was saying to me on Facebook that they had a little shower go through the Winnipeg area, and you could see that just a little while ago, just a very brief shower. We do have more forming to the south. I do think these will weaken on into the evening hours, but with dew points so high and temperature falling to about 10 tonight, we are going to possibly see a little bit of fog. Remember, at the surface, if the temperature and the dew point temperature meet, we have 100% relative humidity, and that means fog will occur. So we're going to look at a fog forecast in a second. I want to show you this first. And this is from Delaney Allen and Gillam, Manitoba last night. Look at that amazing aurora. Here is your aurora forecast, not just tonight, but Tuesday night. Thing is, we got a lot of cloud cover around, but anywhere in this band of green here, this is where we could see some enhanced aurora activity late tonight, likely after midnight. But you can see there is going to be a little bit of cloud on and off. So pick one of the clear periods after midnight and you should be okay. All right, now look at the north low pressure system into tomorrow afternoon. Watch what happens Tuesday night into Wednesday morning as that trucks across into northern Manitoba. And there's another high pressure that's going to feed moisture into the system off Hudson Bay. But this is snow. This is an accumulating snow in the northeast. For the south, it's a cold front that ahead of the cold front gets us to 15 or 16 degrees on Wednesday. But if you look at your phone app, and don't look at your phone app, but if you look at that and trust that forecast, you're going to be very unhappy later in the day on Wednesday because this cold front's going to swing through and it's going to be a lot different as you head home from work or school on Wednesday afternoon. Temperatures will already be diving in through the afternoon and these north winds pick up 30 gusting to 50, and then Thursday is just a very chilly day. All right, back to the fog situation. As we head into the early morning, some pretty low visibilities here, so need to be careful of the driving first thing in the morning hours, and then that fog will dissipate and lift as we head into the day. So low tonight, 10. We've got some patchy fog around. That'll last into the morning hours at 10 degrees, and then 19 in the afternoon. Again, a fairly light wind day and a sun-cloud mix. Then Wednesday, the change, and as we get into Thursday morning, we're looking at temps around -1. Thursday afternoon's high, just 6 degrees, and all the way to -4 by Friday morning, back to 10 in the sunshine on Friday afternoon.
Weather Update is brought to you by Home Equip, your trusted local source for Pride Mobility scooters. From sales to rental and repair, our team is here to serve you.
The funeral for a longtime Winnipeg politician and minister was held yesterday. Bill Blakey is being remembered as a man who loved his community. The former NDP MP died last Saturday after a long battle with cancer. His daughter, Rebecca Blakey, says he was always there to support her and her siblings in whatever they wanted to do. He also believed in the power of getting involved.
Thanks to my dad, I grew up believing, knowing, and seeing firsthand what unfortunately not enough folks seem able to believe anymore these days. That good people get involved in politics in a genuine attempt to make the world a better place.
Bill Blakey represented the Elmwood-Transcona area from 1979 to 2008. He was 71 years old. Winnipeg police are asking for information on 2 homicides that happened over the weekend. The victim in the first one was only 16 years old. Police were called to the 500 block of Balmoral Street Friday morning. That's where they found his body. No other details have been released. The second victim died Sunday morning at Health Sciences Centre. He's been identified as 27-year-old Credence Justice Beardy from Winnipeg. He had been found at 6:45 a.m. that morning on the ground near Sherbrooke Street and Cumberland Avenue, unresponsive with suspicious injuries. Anyone with information should contact police or Crime Stoppers. A totem pole from British Columbia is now on display at Assiniboine Park. The 21-meter-tall pole tells the artist, Charles Joseph's story of being taken away from his family to attend St. Michael's Indian Residential School in British Columbia. Now, the pole was initially commissioned by Jim Basili, the former chair and CEO of Research in Motion, who now has gifted it to the Southern Chiefs organization. Grand Chief Jerry Daniels says the totem pole will eventually be moved to the new SCO building, formerly the Hudson's Bay, downtown.
As we build this project, and until the space is ready, the totem pole needed a home. And we could not have a better temporary home than the Assiniboine Park.
Although totem poles are not traditional for Manitoba's Indigenous people, Daniel says it is appropriate given the significance of residential schools here. That's Ringo Starr singing his song World Go Round. He and his all-star band were scheduled to play at the Canada Life Centre in downtown Winnipeg tomorrow night, but that show has been canceled. Starr, who is 82 years old, has tested positive for COVID-19. Tomorrow's visit would have been the first time he's set foot in Manitoba since August 18, 1964, when a plane transporting the Beatles to San Francisco touched down in Winnipeg for about 24 minutes. It needed to refuel. Starr's other Canadian dates this week, the ones in Saskatoon, Lethbridge, Abbotsford, and Penticton, have also been canceled. The social media post first announcing the illness did not disclose the severity of his symptoms. If you missed the interview our Emily Brass did with Ringo Starr last week, you can find it and many other stories on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Subscribe and you can watch your local newscast whenever you want to. News from Iran is coming up next. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Ottawa has announced new sanctions against Iran. It's targeting senior members of the Iranian regime, including members of the Revolutionary Guard, over the death of a woman who died in police custody. But as CBC's Tom Perry reports, activists say Canada needs to go even further in its efforts to isolate Iran.
In Iran, the protests continue, demonstrators venting their anger over the death of Mahsa Amini, the young woman who died after being detained by Iran's morality police. While expressing sympathy for Amini, Iran's supreme leader calls the ongoing demonstrations riots designed by America. Today, a response from Canada. New sanctions targeting 25 individuals and 9 organizations, including Iran's morality police and senior members of its Revolutionary Guard.
Well, I think the sanctions are a good starting point, but by no means are they satisfactory to those of us that work on Iran issues.
Lawyer Kaveh Shahruz helped organize a rally this past weekend in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. Tens of thousands of people came out to denounce Iran's leadership and call on Canada to take a tougher stance against Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the group responsible for shooting down Flight PS 752 in 2020, killing 176 people, including more than 50 Canadians, demanding Ottawa declare it a terror group.
When you're listed as a terror organization, your assets are immediately frozen. Affiliation with a terrorist organization is a criminal offense under our criminal code.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took part in the weekend rally and today called out the Prime Minister for skipping the event.
The Prime Minister didn't have the guts to show up because he didn't want to have to explain why he has failed to criminalize the IRGC, the terrorist arm of the Iranian government, which killed over 50 Canadians when it attacked a civilian aircraft.
We are imposing new sanctions, and you know what, Mr. Speaker? We will do more because more needs to be done. Thank you.
Melanie Joly says more sanctions are on the way, that all options are on the table. The opposition calls that empty words and says what's needed right now is action. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ukrainian forces have scored more gains in their counteroffensive. Ukrainian troops have retaken ground on at least 2 fronts in the regions Russia is trying to annex.
Слава Україні! Слава десантно-штурмовим військам Збройних сил України!
These troops celebrated victory in Limon, a strategic rail hub in the Donetsk area in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine is also making hard-won gains in the southern Kherson region. Russian forces are reported to be suffering from manpower, weapons, and morale problems. Moscow is facing growing international opposition to its invasion of Ukraine. There's no clear winner after the first round of voting in Brazil's presidential election. Both candidates fell short of the 50% required for an outright victory, so the campaign continues. Pre-election polls suggested an easy first-round win for former leftist President Luiz Inácio da Silva, but supporters of right-wing incumbent Jair Bolsonaro came out in force and delivered him a better-than-expected performance. The 2 candidates will face each other in a high-stakes runoff vote October 30th. The race is being watched around the world because of the right-wing populism and the record of downplaying the pandemic and climate change of one of the candidates. Still ahead, John Sauder's in with a look at his Manitoba forecast, and more news is still to come. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. About 35,000 customers are still without power across parts of Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, more than a week after Hurricane Fiona swept through Atlantic Canada. I guess she was a post-tropical storm then, wasn't she? What a mess. In Nova Scotia, about 19,000 customers are still waiting to be connected to the grid. In hard-hit areas like Cape Breton, crews are restoring power home by home, street by street in some neighborhoods. And on Prince Edward Island, crews are still working to restore power to about 16,000 customers. Meantime, today, most public schools on the island did reopen after they were closed all last week due to the storm and the mess from it. Life is a long way from normal, however, for many residents of PEI still who have been dealing with these difficult conditions. Gary Moore has more on that from Charlottetown.
A dangling power line over the Charlottetown street is a reminder that life is far from back to normal for many people. It's day 10 of no lights for this city neighborhood, and it's starting to wear people down.
I was not expecting it to be this bad. I was expecting 3-4 days, maybe 5, but to be here in the middle of the city and to still have a line down, I was hoping that it would be up sooner. Yeah.
Eleanor Crosley has an 18-month-old baby, and trying to care for her young child without power has been challenging.
It's hard with a little one that, I can't do anything with him.
There was some good news for her family yesterday. Power was restored to her mother's neighborhood, so she's planning to move in with her mom until the mess on her street is cleaned up. And with temperatures dropping, the timing couldn't be better.
We're going to be staying with her probably with the weather getting so cold. It's hard to keep a baby warm in a cold house.
Although Crosley and her neighbors don't know how much longer they'll be in the dark, there was a bit of hope today. Crews were working on down lines on nearby streets, a glimmer of hope for seniors who have been living in the dark for more than a week.
Eager to get back electricity so that I can have some hot water, so I can have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea.
In downtown Charlottetown, spirits are starting to dampen. 10 days in the dark is too long for Maureen Robinson. She's exhausted from the whole situation and says it's taken a toll on her mental and physical health.
There's power wires everywhere hanging down. There's a transformer pole leaning against a house. No one's really come to look at it. No one's come to talk to us about it. So we don't know what's going on.
Robinson says there's a lot of questions to be answered about how the cleanup was handled and how it's possible for so many people to still be without power 10 days later. Gary Moore, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Search and rescue crews are continuing their search for survivors along Florida's southwest coast as residents come to grips with the widespread devastation and destruction left behind by Hurricane Ian.
I just don't know what to do with it. I have nothing. I have no car. I have no home.
At least 61 deaths are being attributed to the storm in Florida and 4 in North Carolina. More than 1,600 people have been rescued so far in Florida. A major effort is also underway to restore power to hundreds of thousands of people after last week's devastating Category 4 storm. Some roads remain completely washed out or underwater. Officials are warning residents to stay off the streets so first responders and power crews can gain access. Estimated losses from the hurricane are as high as $47 billion US. Billion. That is just hard to even imagine that amount of money.
Yeah, I was looking at some pictures online today and I saw a picture of a very large boat sitting on top of a car. And just to give you an idea, you know, whole neighborhoods have been wiped out. It's just awful to see.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Our colors are really something to see. You know, have you noticed that they've really come out now?
I have, yes.
Yeah, and leaves are starting to drop, getting cooler. It's going to be a lot cooler end of this week. But for now, we've got warm weather, not just here in the south, but across northern Manitoba as well. Let's get to the maps, and I'll show you the current conditions first of all. 19 at the airport, 19 at the Forks, 20 at the airport, 20 in Steinbach, 16 in Selkirk. And, you know, all of this is with a sun-cloud mix and even a little bit of clearing. As we head into the evening here, the early evening, and a few showers just south of Winnipeg forming a line that are kind of moving north, and I do think they'll weaken out a little bit. Kenora right now at 17. Up to the north, still some teens at this time of day across northern Manitoba. 9 degrees still in Churchill. Forecast conditions do include some patchy fog through parts of northwestern Ontario tonight. A chance of showers around Fort Francis and in through the Dryden area. Here in the southeast, we'll see some patchy fog and a partly cloudy sky overnight. And lows for this time of year should be around 2 degrees. Well, a lot warmer than that as we get into the overnight period. Looking at 7 in Brandon, 4 in Swan River, and 6 in Dauphin. Some patchy fog around Portage, Morden, and Winkler. And then across the north, yeah, we've got some fog as well. 0 tonight in Thompson, but nobody here really below 0 across northern Manitoba. Just 6 degrees in Churchill tomorrow, but 16s around Thompson over into Flin Flon, the Pas at 18, Norway House at 15. A little bit more cloud cover north end of the lakes. And then here in the south, generally, it's a sun-cloud mix. And we could see some morning patchy fog. That would happen early, and that will dissipate early. But another day where temperatures are around 19 to 21 in the southwest, and 19 here in Winnipeg, 21 in Emerson, 20s and 21s down through the White Shell and up through Pinawa and Lac du Bonnet tomorrow. Great opportunity to rake some leaves tomorrow because the winds won't be all that strong. And then after some morning fog, we've got a chance of an afternoon shower in Kenora, Red Lake, and in Dryden.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
Well, as promised, a statue of Dale Howard-Chuck was unveiled at True North Square in Winnipeg over the weekend. The bronze sculpture shows the late, great Winnipeg Jet flying down the ice. Hundreds of Jets fans attended the unveiling ceremony before the Jets' home game against Edmonton on Saturday. Here are some of the sights and sounds.
As you remember Dale today, our family will always remember you. And now he is home again here in Winnipeg.
I drive down Hargrave every single day to the rink. So every day I get to stop at this stoplight and I get to look at this statue and remember all the lessons that he taught me. I get to remember, you know, all the fun stories that we had of winning games, losing games, you know, learning lessons.
He meant an awful lot to all of us. And I do know this, that statue will be here, and whether you're a fan, whether you're family, whether you're a teammate, when you come by and look at this statue, remember those great times that you had with him. Great times on the ice, as a fan, great times watching him live or on TV. For family, all the moments that you had to spend with him, because that's what he'd want.
Still ahead, it started off as a healing walk last year to acknowledge survivors of residential schools. See how it grew into a half marathon and where it could go from here. We talk to the organizer of the Reconciliation Run next. Friday was the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. To commemorate the day, University of Manitoba student athlete Traychelle Bunn organized a reconciliation run. The half marathon started off in Birtle on the site of the original residential school there, and ended on Birdtail Sioux Dakota Nation. Traychelle Bunn joins us now. Hi, Traychelle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Tell us about the reconciliation run. How did it go?
Overall, I think for the first year it went amazingly well. I was really impressed with the amount of support that we had from the community and everyone who signed up and all the participants. So we ended up having around 85 people registered, both like virtually and for the in-person event. And we even had a few race day sign-ups. So some people even showed up and registered on the day of to partake in the reconciliation run. So overall, for its first year, I was really overwhelmed and overtaken with the amount of support and all the participants.
Traychelle, what inspired you to organize this?
So it all started in the July of 2021. I originally organized a healing walk that followed the same route as the reconciliation run on behalf of my community of Birdtail Sioux Dakota Nation. So the healing walk was inspired by my Kushi Mildred, which means grandmother in Dakota, my Uncle Donald, which means grandfather, who were Birtle residential school survivors and attended the Birtle residential school in Birtle. So growing up, I always heard my Uncle Donald say that when he was at the Birtle residential school, he wanted nothing more than to just run away and go home. So the healing walk in July of 2021 symbolized returning to the Birtle residential school and walking home in honor of my Uncle Donald and all the children across Canada and Turtle Island who wanted nothing more than to run away and walk away on their own terms from residential schools. So it was a really big success and had a lot of participants for the healing walk in July 2021. So I knew it was something that I wanted to do again. So I decided to turn it into the Reconciliation Run, which is Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation half marathon. I think the most important thing for me about the Reconciliation Run is it provides an event to take part in on a day meant for reflection and education for participants, both from the Indigenous community and the non-Indigenous community. So we had a wide range of participants this year, and it was nice to see everyone come together in the spirit of reconciliation.
You say on your website, reconciliationrun.ca, movement is medicine. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so movement is medicine is kind of a term or a quote used in the Indigenous community pretty often, and I think everyone has their own meaning tied to it and what it means to them personally. But for me, I grew up and I started skating in my backyard with my dad when I was just 3 years old. So sport and the sport of hockey still is a big part of my life. So I play hockey for the University of Manitoba Boys and Women's Hockey team. So sport and movement has always been a way for me to stay balanced on the four quadrants of the medicine wheel. So both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So for me, movement has always been a way to, to like heal and like kind of stay balanced overall. So I think when I first heard of the recoveries in Kamloops, the 215 children in unmarked graves, there was a lot of hurt in the Indigenous community. So organizing the healing walk and kind of basing it around the term movement is medicine was a way to provide healing for my community in a time, and still is a time of hurting and mourning for our community and the continuum of unmarked graves being uncovered at residential schools all across the country.
You hope to expand next year. How so?
Yeah, so actually this year we did have a virtual option that was available to participants where you could register online and run any distance, anywhere at a location near you, and then we mailed out the Reconciliation Run t-shirts and participation like medallions, medals to participants who registered. So that was an option, and we ended up getting a lot of support for that. So our first submission for that came on the 29th, so the day before the Reconciliation Run in Birtle, and it was from a man in Quebec. And then we even had people registered virtually all the way to like BC. So all across Canada, it really kind of reached reach a bunch of different people all across the country. So I'm hoping to expand on that. And I even had some inquiries about people wanting to, organize a reconciliation run in their community from the residential school that their community went to, or the residential school that's still standing in their community. So it'd be nice to be able to expand on the reconciliation run and kind of be able to reach more people all across the country.
Traychelle Bunn, well done, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Your 7-day forecast is still to come, as is your daily lift. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Well, here's your 7-day forecast. Another very pleasant day for this time of year. On the way for tomorrow at 19 degrees. The 16 on Wednesday is early. Cold front goes through and starts to change the game a little bit. Just 6 for a high on Thursday, and then a bit of a recovery. 10 on Friday in the sunshine. The weekend looking seasonal, and Thanksgiving Monday up to 17 in the sunshine. The world's first ever cloned Arctic wolf made its debut in northeast China last week.
This wolf was born in a lab in Beijing back in June, apparently. Here's your daily lift. Oh, so cute. Maya was cloned from a skin cell of an Arctic wolf that originally hailed from Canada and then went to this amusement park in China. That's its surrogate bum. That the pup was born into that, was implanted, I guess, the fetus into the little beagle pup you saw running around there, that mother. And look at them, mother and child. People at the park, John, said they wanted to replicate Maya's biological mother because they had a real affection for her, but also Arctic wolves are considered an endangered species, so this is one way of continuing on these beautiful animals found in northeastern Eurasia and northern parts of Canada and also Greenland.
I wonder if they know they don't look the same.
I wonder if they do. I hope they always get along, because at some point that child is going to have a real advantage over mom.
Yeah, it could get hungry too.
Oh, let's hope not. I'm sure they'll take very good care of them to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Oh, yeah.
They want a happy ending to this story, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us tonight.
Have a great night.
See you tomorrow.